The night was quiet in the small village of Ndlovu. The moon hung low and red, shining like fire across the sky. Inside a small clay hut, a woman named Zahara cried out as she gave birth to her first child. The midwife worked quickly, whispering prayers to the ancestors. Then, after a moment of deep silence, the cry of a baby filled the room. It was a sound full of life. Zahara looked down and smiled. Her baby girl was small and soft, her skin glowing in the red light of the moon. But then, as the midwife cleaned the child, she gasped. On the baby's left shoulder was a mark, bright and red like the moon itself. It was shaped like a crescent flame. The midwife stepped back and shook her head. "This is not a good sign," she said in a low voice. "A child born under the red moon with a burning mark will bring sorrow." Zahara frowned and pulled the baby close. "Do not speak such things," she said. "She is only a child." "My child." But the midwife crossed herself and whispered, "The elders will speak of this. They will call her cursed." By morning, the story had already spread. Villagers came to see the child with the strange mark. They stood at the doorway, peering in but not daring to enter. Some made signs to ward off evil. Others whispered behind their hands. "A mark of bad luck," one man said. "The ancestors are angry." "She will bring storms," said another. "She should be taken to the forest," an old woman muttered, "before the spirits become restless." Zahara heard them all, but she refused to let fear take root in her heart. She named her daughter Amina, which means peace, hoping the name would guide her fate. Days turned into weeks, and Amina grew strong. Her little laugh filled the hut. Zahara would sing to her, rocking her under the stars. But even as Amina's spirit shone bright, the people kept their distance. Children were told not to play near her. Women whispered when Zahara passed by with her baby strapped to her back. When Amina was old enough to walk, she noticed how people looked at her. Their eyes were cold, and their smiles were false. She would touch her shoulder where the mark lay, always warm beneath her skin, and ask her mother, "Why do they not like me?" Zahara would kneel beside her and say softly, "They do not understand you, my child. What the world calls strange may be what the heavens call special." Still, Amina felt alone. The other children played by the river, chasing frogs and splashing water, but when she came near, they scattered like frightened birds. She would sit by herself under the big baobab tree, drawing shapes in the sand. Sometimes she would talk to the wind as if it could hear her. One evening, as the sun melted into the hills, Amina saw an old man sitting by the river. His hair was white, and his eyes were kind. He watched her quietly, then said, "Child, why do you sit alone?" "They say I am cursed," she answered. The old man smiled. "The same people who fear thunder also dance when it brings rain. Do not listen to them." He stood up and dipped his hand into the river. "See this water? It carries both dirt and life. Still, it flows." Amina nodded, though she did not fully understand. But his words stayed with her. As years passed, Amina learned to help her mother make clay pots. She had a gift for shaping the earth. Her hands moved gently, molding beauty from mud. People began to notice her skill, though they still avoided her eyes. Zahara sold their pots at the market, and slowly their home became known for fine work. But not everyone was pleased. Some villagers whispered that her talent came from dark spirits. When a storm destroyed several houses one night, they said it was because of her mark. They came to Zahara's hut, shouting, "Take that cursed child away." Zahara stood firm in front of them, holding Amina behind her. "She is my daughter," she said, her voice trembling but strong. "You will not touch her." An elder stepped forward. "Zahara, you must understand, the child is different. Strange things follow her. The river rose high after she bathed in it last week." "That is not her doing," Zahara said. "The rains have been heavy." But they would not listen. One man threw a stone that hit the side of the hut. Another shouted, "If you keep her, we will not trade with you any more." That night, when the crowd finally left, Amina sat in her mother's arms and cried. "Why am I different?" she whispered. "Why do they hate me?" Zahara brushed her hair gently. "You are different because you were born with light," she said. "Sometimes light frightens those who live in shadows." The next morning, Zahara took Amina to the edge of the forest. The air was cool, and the sound of birds filled the trees. She showed Amina how to find healing herbs and how to speak softly to the earth when she took something from it. "Respect what gives you life," Zahara said. "The land listens." From then on, Amina spent much of her time in the forest. She learned to mix herbs that could ease pain and heal wounds. People who once feared her began to visit in secret when they were sick. She never turned anyone away. Even those who had spoken badly of her left with tears of shame and gratitude. Still, she remained apart. At night, she would sit outside and look up at the moon. The mark on her shoulder glowed faintly in the silver light. She would touch it and whisper, "Why were you given to me?" Sometimes she dreamed of fire and water joining together. She would wake with her heart racing, feeling that something greater waited for her beyond the hills. Then one evening, a great drum sounded from the village square. It was the call for the Festival of Light, an event held once every 5 years in the royal city. The festival was where the prince would choose one maiden from across the land to serve among the royal artists. It was a great honor, and families prepared their daughters with care. Zahara looked at Amina as the drumbeats faded. "You should go," she said. Amina blinked. "Me?" "Yes," her mother said. "You have a gift, Amina. Let them see it." "But they will laugh at me." "They laughed before," Zahara said, smiling gently. "Yet you still shine." Amina hesitated, then nodded slowly. She felt the mark on her shoulder warm, as if it were alive. For the first time, she wondered if her mother was right. Maybe what others feared was not a curse at all. Maybe it was a sign that her life was meant to be different. That night, as the moon rose high and bright, she looked out over the village that had always shunned her. The wind moved through the grass like a whisper of promise. In her heart, she felt something shift, a quiet strength growing, small but sure. The seasons changed, and the years moved quietly in the village of Ndlovu. Amina grew into a young woman with kind eyes and steady hands. Her days were filled with shaping clay beside her mother, Zahara. Their small hut smelled of earth and smoke, and shelves of smooth pots lined the walls like rows of sleeping suns. People no longer called her cursed openly, but whispers still followed her like shadows. Yet Amina had learned to walk with her head high. She spoke little, smiled gently, and poured her heart into her work. Her pottery was unlike anyone else's. She shaped them with patience, painted them with stars, and carved gentle lines that told stories. Each piece seemed to hold a quiet song of hope. One morning, the sound of drums rolled through the valley. A messenger from the royal city arrived, his horse covered in golden cloth. Children followed him, laughing, while the elders gathered in the square. He raised his voice and shouted, "Hear me, people of Ndlovu! The royal family of Zambora announces the Festival of Light. Every village shall send their daughters of age. The prince himself, Prince Cato, will choose one maiden to join the royal artisans." The crowd cheered. It was a great honor. The chosen one would live in the palace, serve the royal family, and bring pride to her village. But as the excitement grew, eyes turned toward Amina. Some smiled mockingly. Others whispered, "She will not go. The cursed girl cannot stand before the prince." That night, Amina sat quietly by the fire. Her mother watched her hands tremble as she shaped a lump of clay. "You should go," Zahara said softly. Amina looked up, her eyes wide. "Go? To the festival? They will only laugh at me, Mama. You know how they are." Zahara smiled gently. "Let them laugh. You were born to be more than their whispers. Let your hands speak, Amina. The prince will not see your mark, he will see your gift." Amina shook her head. "But what if they send me away?" "Then you will come home with your spirit unbroken," Zahara said. "That is enough." For days, Amina thought about her mother's words. At night, she dreamed of the palace, tall towers shining under the moon. She dreamed of music and colors she had never seen. Then one morning, she woke with a strange calmness. She packed her best pot, one she had painted with tiny white stars and golden circles, like the sky above Ndlovu. She wrapped it in cloth and said goodbye to her mother. Zahara held her tightly. "Walk with courage," she whispered. "Do not hide your mark. The sun does not hide its fire." Amina nodded, tears in her eyes. Then she started her journey to the royal city. The road was long and dusty. She walked barefoot, carrying her pot carefully in both hands. Other girls passed by, riding donkeys or carriages. They wore bright dresses, their hair shining with oil and beads. When they saw Amina walking, some laughed. "Look at her feet," one girl said. "Where is her escort?" another teased. "She thinks she can enter the palace with mud on her skirt," someone whispered. Amina said nothing. She kept walking, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Each step felt heavy, but her heart was steady. By the time she reached the city gates, her feet were sore and her clothes dusty. The royal city was larger than she had ever imagined. Houses of stone rose high, painted with red and gold. Music floated in the air, and lanterns hung from every post, glowing like captured fireflies. The palace gates stood tall and bright, guarded by soldiers in silver armor. Amina joined the line of young women waiting to enter the courtyard. Some wore fine silks. Some carried baskets of fruit or jewelry as gifts. Amina clutched her clay pot close to her chest. When her turn came, a guard frowned. "Where is your gift?" he asked. Amina held up her pot. "This," she said simply. He looked at it, plain compared to the glittering treasures others had brought, and raised an eyebrow. But he said nothing and waved her in. Inside, the courtyard shone with color and sound. Music played, and flowers floated in shallow pools of water. The prince stood at the center, tall and calm, dressed in white and gold. His face was kind but serious. He looked at each maiden as she presented her gift. When it was Amina's turn, whispers followed her. "That's the girl with the strange mark," someone murmured. "She came from the cursed village." Amina felt their eyes on her. Her heart beat fast, but she took a deep breath and stepped forward. She placed her clay pot before the prince. The sunlight fell on it, making the painted stars shine faintly. Prince Cato looked at the pot for a long moment. "You made this yourself?" he asked. "Yes, my lord," Amina said quietly. "It was shaped by hand and fired in the earth. I painted it with the stars because they never lose their light." The prince studied her face. His gaze fell on the mark on her shoulder, half hidden by her cloth. Instead of turning away, he looked into her eyes. "What is your name?" "Amina," she said. "Amina of Ndlovu," he repeated slowly. "They say your village fears you." "Why?" The crowd went silent. Even the music stopped. Amina swallowed hard. "Because I was born with this mark," she said softly. "They say it brings bad luck. But it is part of me, as the sun is part of the day." Prince Cato's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. Curiosity, perhaps even respect. "And yet you came here?" Amina nodded. "My mother told me not to hide what was given to me. She said if my hands can shape beauty, then they cannot be cursed." For a long moment, the prince said nothing. Then he turned to his advisers and said, "Let her pot be placed among the finest. It speaks of light and truth." Gasps spread through the courtyard. Some of the noble girls frowned. Others whispered angrily. But Amina only bowed her head. She stepped back, her heart pounding with both fear and wonder. Later, as the sun began to set, the prince walked through the courtyard, looking at all the gifts. He stopped before Amina's pot again. He traced one of the painted stars with his finger. "This one shines brighter than the rest," he said softly, almost to himself. Amina watched from a distance. She did not know what he meant, but she felt warmth rise in her chest, not shame this time, but pride. When the festival ended, the prince raised his hand. "Tomorrow I will choose," he announced. "But tonight I will remember the girl who walked barefoot from the village of Ndlovu. For courage is also a form of beauty." The crowd murmured again, and Amina felt eyes upon her. But for the first time, she did not care. She looked up at the sky, where the stars were beginning to appear, and smiled. She had come to the city with nothing but her mother's faith and her own 2 hands. Now, she felt that something had changed, not just in her, but in the air around her. As the lanterns flickered and the drums began again, Amina whispered to herself, "Let them laugh. I am not cursed. I am seen." Far above, the stars she had painted on her pot glimmered in the real sky, as if they too were watching and waiting for what would come next. Life in the palace slowly changed for Amina. Each day began with the soft sound of the morning drums and the smell of flowers from the royal gardens. She worked in her small studio near the courtyard, shaping clay and mixing colors. Her work brought calmness to those who saw it. But not everyone in the palace was pleased with her presence. Jealousy crept through the halls like a quiet shadow. Some servants whispered as she passed. "The prince looks at her too kindly," they said. "She acts humble, but she is clever." Others laughed behind her back. "A village girl cannot belong here. The prince will see her true place soon." Even some of the royal artists felt bitter. They had trained for years, hoping to gain the prince's favor. Yet now, a girl from Ndlovu, barefoot and simple, had been chosen over them. Their envy grew like weeds after rain. One morning, when Amina entered her workshop, she found one of her pots broken on the floor. The design had taken her days to finish. The pieces lay scattered like fallen stars. She bent down slowly and gathered them with trembling hands. Her heart hurt, but she said nothing. A young servant, Lela, stood nearby, her eyes full of pity. "Someone did this on purpose," she whispered. Amina shook her head. "Let them. Clay can be shaped again." But the truth was harder to mend. Later that week, one of the court ladies spilled water on her paints. Another switched her tools. The whispers grew louder, the laughter sharper. Yet Amina never raised her voice. She continued to work with quiet strength, her calmness confusing her enemies. Prince Cato saw the change in the palace. He noticed the cold glances, the sudden silence when Amina entered a room. One evening, he found her sitting alone in her workshop, staring at a pot she had half finished. "Why do you let them hurt you?" he asked softly. Amina looked up, surprised to see him there. "Because anger gives them what they want," she said. "If I stay kind, I still have peace. That is something they cannot take." The prince smiled faintly. "The one they rejected brings peace to us all," he said, almost to himself. "I must remember that." But soon, something far more serious happened. One morning, the palace was filled with worry. The king had fallen ill. His skin burned with fever, and his breath came short. The royal healers tried their best, but the medicine they gave him brought no relief. The queen sat by his bedside, her face pale with fear. Rumors spread quickly. Some said the illness was punishment from the gods. Others whispered that it was a curse brought by Amina's mark. "Since she entered the palace," a servant muttered, "strange things have happened." When Amina heard the whispers, her heart grew heavy. She could not bear to be blamed for the king's pain. That night, she went to the royal garden and knelt under the moonlight. "If I can help, show me how," she prayed. She remembered the herbs her mother had taught her to use, the ones that cooled fever and eased pain. Quietly, she left the palace and went to the forest near the city walls. The moon guided her as she gathered leaves and roots, humming softly to calm her heart. When she returned, her hands smelled of earth and healing. She mixed the herbs into a warm drink and went to the guards at the king's door. "Please," she said, "let me try. I learned these remedies from my mother. They will not harm him." The guards hesitated, unsure. But the queen, desperate and tired, overheard her words. "Let her in," she said. "If the prince trusts her, so will I." Amina entered the chamber quietly. The king lay still, his face pale. She knelt beside him and placed her hand gently on his arm. Then she whispered a soft prayer and gave him the drink. For 3 nights, she stayed by his side, changing the herbs, cooling his forehead, and praying silently. On the 4th morning, the king opened his eyes. His fever was gone. The color had returned to his cheeks. The queen gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. "He is awake," she whispered. Word spread quickly through the palace. The king was healing, and it was the village girl who had saved him. Those who had mocked her now fell silent. Some lowered their eyes in shame when she passed. The queen came to Amina and said, "You have given my husband back to me. I was wrong to doubt you." Amina bowed her head. "I only did what I was taught, my queen. I am glad he is well." From that day, the queen's heart softened. She often visited Amina's workshop, asking her about her art and her herbs. She listened to her stories of Ndlovu and her mother, and she began to see not a cursed girl, but a woman full of grace and wisdom. Still, envy does not die easily. Some courtiers continued to whisper, though they spoke more carefully now. Perhaps she is lucky, they said. But why does the prince always protect her? There must be more between them. The prince heard these whispers too, but he ignored them. When he saw Amina in the garden one afternoon, he said, "Let them talk. The truth needs no defense." Amina smiled gently. "The truth is patient," she said. "It will stand when lies have fallen." Her words touched him deeply. In his heart, he knew that she was different from anyone he had ever met, strong but humble, wise but gentle. He began to understand why his soul felt lighter when she was near. As time passed, Amina's art took on new beauty. Her pots showed scenes of healing and unity, hands reaching out to one another, rivers joining together. The queen asked her to make a great vase for the king's recovery, one that would stand in the palace hall as a reminder of gratitude and peace. Amina worked on it for many nights, alone in her workshop. The design showed the rising sun over the hills of Ndlovu, with 2 doves flying toward the light. When it was finished, the king himself came to see it. He stood before her creation, silent for a long time. Then he said, "Your hands are blessed, Amina. You have given me life twice, once through healing and again through this beauty." She bowed deeply. "Your Majesty, I only do what my heart guides me to do." The king turned to his son. "Cato, you chose well," he said with a smile. The prince's eyes met Amina's. Neither spoke, but both felt something unspoken between them, a connection built not on magic or rumor, but on truth and courage. And though shadows of envy still moved quietly in the corners of the palace, they no longer had power. For Amina had become more than the girl from Ndlovu. She was now a symbol of peace, a living reminder that what the world calls cursed can become the very thing that saves it. At night, when the palace was quiet, Amina would sit by her window and watch the stars. She often thought of her mother and whispered, "I am safe, Mama. I am strong." The wind from the hills carried her words softly through the night. Somewhere beyond the walls, the river of Ndlovu flowed on, carrying her story with it, a story of kindness, courage, and light shining even in the deepest shadows. The morning sun rose softly over the royal city. Golden light spilled across the palace walls and touched the garden with warmth. Birds sang from the tall trees, and the air was filled with the scent of flowers. It was the final day of the Festival of Light. The moment everyone had been waiting for had come. The prince would make his choice. Amina stood among the other maidens, her heart beating fast. Around her, the girls whispered, their dresses bright and fine. She wore the same simple white cloth from the day before, now dusted clean, and held her hands together to stop them from trembling. The courtyard was full. Nobles, guards, and villagers had gathered to watch. The drummers played softly as Prince Cato walked out from the palace steps. He was dressed in royal gold, a thin crown resting upon his dark curls. He looked calm, but his eyes moved slowly over the line of maidens, studying each face carefully. One by one, the girls bowed as he passed. Each hoped to catch his attention. Some smiled sweetly, others lowered their gaze shyly. When he stopped to speak to one, the crowd murmured with excitement. But Amina kept her head low. She told herself not to hope, not to dream too much. She had come to show her work, not to be chosen. The prince reached the end of the line, and then, to everyone's surprise, he turned back. His eyes moved again until they rested on her, the quiet girl from Ndlovu, the one with the strange mark. The whispers began at once. "Why is he looking at her?" someone said. "She does not belong here." Prince Cato stepped closer. The sunlight fell across Amina's shoulder, and the mark, shaped like a red crescent flame, glowed faintly. The people gasped, and a few stepped back as if in fear. But the prince did not move away. He looked at her mark, then into her eyes. "What they call a curse," he said clearly, "I see as courage." The courtyard fell silent. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. Amina looked up, surprised, not knowing what to say. Prince Cato reached out his hand. "Amina of Ndlovu," he said, his voice steady, "you will be my royal artist." The words hung in the air like music. Then the crowd erupted. Some gasped, others whispered loudly. A few nobles frowned, clearly displeased. Never in the history of the kingdom had a prince chosen someone from a poor village, let alone a girl whom the people once called cursed. But Cato did not care for their whispers. He took Amina's hand gently and raised it for all to see. "Let her work and her spirit speak for her," he said. "For I choose not with my eyes, but with my heart." Amina felt her knees weaken, but she stood tall. Tears filled her eyes, not of fear but of relief. For the first time, someone had looked beyond her mark, beyond the stories, and seen her true self. After the ceremony, servants led her to a small chamber within the palace. It was filled with sunlight and clay tools, ready for her work. She touched the smooth wooden table and smiled softly. Everything felt unreal. From that day, Amina began her new life as the royal artist. Each morning, she walked through the gardens, gathering inspiration from flowers and rivers. Her hands worked with grace and patience. The pots she made were more than vessels. They carried stories, of struggle, of peace, of forgiveness. The prince often came to watch her work. He would stand silently beside her, studying the gentle way her fingers shaped the clay. "You work with calmness," he told her one day. Amina smiled faintly. "The clay listens when you are kind," she said. Prince Cato nodded. "Then you are a teacher not only to the clay, but to us all." But not everyone in the palace shared his admiration. Whispers spread through the halls like wind. Some said the prince had been enchanted by the girl's strange beauty. Others claimed she used secret powers to win his favor. The court ladies avoided her, pretending to be polite but watching her with sharp eyes. When Amina passed by, they whispered behind their fans. "She is only a village girl," one said. "The prince will grow tired of her." Another laughed softly. "Let her enjoy it while she can. The king will never allow it." Amina heard them, but she did not let their words reach her heart. She had learned long ago that silence was stronger than anger. She poured her feelings into her art instead. Weeks passed, and her fame grew quietly. The queen herself came to see her work. "You have a gentle hand," the queen said. "Your pots tell stories without words." "Thank you, my queen," Amina said, bowing deeply. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, the prince came again to her workshop. He brought with him one of her finished pots, the one painted with blue waves and silver leaves. "This piece," he said, "it feels alive." Amina smiled shyly. "It tells of the river that gives life to Ndlovu," she explained. "My mother used to say that the river carries both pain and hope. I painted it so I would not forget." Prince Cato looked at her thoughtfully. "You carry your home within your heart," he said. "That is why your art breathes." She met his eyes and saw kindness there, not pity, not curiosity, but something deeper. She looked away quickly, feeling warmth rise to her cheeks. After that day, their friendship grew. They spoke often about the meaning of art, about courage, about the power of truth. The prince treated her as an equal, not as a servant. He respected her mind as much as her skill. Still, the rumors grew stronger. Some of the council members began to whisper to the king, saying the girl was dangerous. "She will distract the prince," they said. "Her mark is a sign of dark magic." But Cato stood firm. "I have seen her heart," he told them. "It is pure." When word of this reached Amina, she felt both grateful and worried. She did not want to cause trouble for the prince. One evening, she went to the palace garden to clear her mind. The moon shone brightly above, silvering the leaves. She knelt by the fountain, her reflection trembling in the water. She touched her mark and whispered, "Why was I given this? Why must it always bring both light and trouble?" Unseen by her, the prince had entered the garden. He heard her quiet voice and said gently, "Perhaps because the moon can never shine without the night." Amina turned, startled. The prince smiled and stepped closer. "Do not hide your mark, Amina. It is a part of your story, and your story gives hope." Her eyes softened. "And what if the people never understand?" "Then we will teach them," he said simply. From that night, something changed between them. It was not yet love, but it was trust, deep and unshakable. Amina worked harder than ever, pouring her heart into every piece she made. Her art began to heal more than walls and halls. it began to heal people. Those who had once whispered against her started to visit her workshop, asking her to make pots for their homes. They said her creations brought peace, and they spoke of her gift with wonder instead of fear. And though rumors still danced in the dark corners of the palace, Amina no longer felt alone. She had found her place, not because she was chosen by chance, but because she had shown the courage to stand in her truth. The summer was hotter than anyone could remember. The sun hung in the sky like a burning coin, and the rivers began to dry. Day after day, the earth cracked, the grass turned yellow, and the wind carried only dust. The once green fields of Zambora became brown and brittle. Even the royal gardens, which had always bloomed in every season, now lay silent and dry. The people grew afraid. The farmers could not grow food, and their animals fell weak from thirst. Children cried for water, and mothers searched the empty wells in despair. It had been 3 long months since a single drop of rain had fallen. The sky, once kind, seemed to have forgotten them. Inside the palace, the mood was heavy. The king sat in his hall, his face lined with worry. The queen prayed each night, her voice trembling with fear. The priests made offerings, but the heavens stayed silent. Finally, one of the oldest priests remembered an ancient story, one that few believed anymore. He stood before the king and said, "My lord, there is an old tale told by our ancestors. It speaks of a child born with a mark of flame. The prophecy says that when the land grows thirsty and hope is lost, she will call the rains back to life." The hall grew silent. The queen's eyes widened. The king frowned thoughtfully, then said, "A mark of flame? Could such a person truly exist?" The priest nodded slowly. "She already lives among us," he said. "The girl with the red mark, the one the prince calls his royal artist." The king and queen exchanged glances. They both thought of Amina, of her strange mark that once frightened the people. Prince Cato, who was standing nearby, felt his heart tighten. "She has already brought healing once," he said. "Perhaps she can bring it again." Without delay, a messenger was sent to find Amina. That night, Amina stood before the royal family in the palace courtyard. The torches burned low, and the air was dry and hot. The king looked at her with weary eyes. "Child," he said, "the land is dying. The wells are empty. The people have lost faith. The priests believe you are the one spoken of in the old tale." Amina bowed her head. "I do not know if I am the one," she said quietly. "But I will do whatever I can." The queen stepped forward and took her hand. "We trust you, my dear," she said softly. "The heavens would not give you such a mark for nothing." Prince Cato stood beside her, his eyes steady and full of hope. "You have faced fear before," he said. "You were never cursed, Amina. You were born for this." The next morning, Amina walked out of the palace gates and into the open fields. The villagers followed her, silent and afraid. The earth beneath their feet was cracked like broken glass. The trees stood bare, their branches reaching upward like pleading hands. Amina stopped in the middle of the field, where the soil was driest. She knelt down slowly and touched the ground with her fingers. The dust clung to her skin, warm and lifeless. Around her, the people watched, whispering prayers. She closed her eyes. Memories of her mother came to her, of the nights by the river, the lessons about the earth and the wind. She remembered her mother's words, "Respect what gives you life. The land listens." Amina pressed her palm to the ground. "O great earth," she whispered, "you have carried us through joy and sorrow. Hear us now. We are your children. We are thirsty." Her voice trembled, but she did not stop. "If my mark was meant for something, let it be for this." Tears welled in her eyes and fell onto the dry soil. For a moment, nothing happened. The people watched in silence. Then, slowly, a soft wind began to blow. It moved across the field, gentle at first, then stronger. The dust lifted and danced in the air. Amina looked up. The sky, which had been pale and empty, began to change. Dark clouds rolled in from the horizon, thick and heavy. A low rumble of thunder echoed through the valley. The people gasped, their eyes wide with wonder. Then the rain came, first as a few drops, then as a rush of silver pouring from the heavens. It fell on the dry earth, on the roofs, on the people who lifted their hands and faces to the sky. The ground drank greedily, the cracks closing as the rain filled them. Amina stood in the center of it all, soaked but smiling. The mark on her shoulder glowed faintly, as if it, too, rejoiced. The villagers fell to their knees, shouting her name, not in fear this time, but in praise. Amina! Amina! The blessed one! The prince ran toward her, rain dripping from his hair. He reached for her hands, holding them tightly. His eyes shone with pride and wonder. "You did it," he said softly. Amina shook her head. "No," she whispered. "It was not me. It was the earth remembering mercy." But the people would not forget what they had seen. By the next morning, every corner of the land was talking about the miracle. The rivers flowed again, the air smelled of life, and laughter returned to the villages. The king called for a great gathering in the palace courtyard. The people came dressed in bright colors, their faces glowing with joy. Musicians played drums and flutes, and the sound of celebration filled the air. Prince Cato stood before the crowd, Amina at his side. The king and queen looked on proudly. When the music stopped, the prince raised his hand for silence. He spoke clearly, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "You once called her cursed," he said. "You feared her mark and turned your backs on her. But today, you have seen with your own eyes what the truth is. She was never cursed. She was chosen." The crowd cheered, their voices rising like thunder. Some cried. Some fell to their knees. The same people who once whispered against her now sang her name with love. Prince Cato turned to her and smiled. "You brought life back to the kingdom," he said. "The rain answered you. The earth listens to you. You belong not only to me, Amina, but to this land." The king stepped forward, his voice strong again after his illness. "From this day, Amina shall be known as Queen of the Rain," he declared. "Her mark shall no longer be a sign of shame but a symbol of blessing and hope." The people shouted in joy. They threw flowers at her feet, and the musicians began to play again. Amina stood quietly, tears of happiness shining in her eyes. She looked up at the sky, now full of soft clouds and gentle rain. The mark on her shoulder glowed once more, but this time it did not burn. It felt light, like a promise fulfilled. She thought of her mother, of the little hut in Ndlovu, of the days when she had walked barefoot on dusty roads. Everything that had once caused her pain had led her here, to this moment, to this purpose. As the rain continued to fall, Prince Cato took her hand in his. "Walk beside me," he said. "Together, we will build a kingdom that remembers your kindness." Amina smiled. "And we will teach them," she said, "that what they fear may one day save them." The people cheered louder, and the drums echoed through the valley. The rain washed over everyone, cleansing the past and blessing the future. From that day on, Amina's story spread beyond Zambora. Travelers carried it across deserts and rivers, telling of the girl with the flame mark who called the rain. Children grew up hearing her name spoken with love, not fear. And whenever the rain fell gently on the roofs of Ndlovu, Zahara would step outside, lift her face to the sky, and whisper with pride, "That is my daughter."